Hey, I thought you were out here working on those motor mounts.
Alright, we better get after it. Good morning, Jeep lovers and YouTube do-it-yourselfers. Tom here. Today we're going to be replacing the engine mounts in the old CJ-5. So we ordered our kit from through JC Whitney, and it came from Crown Auto. It was a pretty good deal. I think it was only like 20 or 22 bucks for all the engine mounts. It came quickly. There was no shipping fee included, so that's a pretty good deal. So let's see what it gave us. So here's the rear, the transmission mount, or it could be considered the rear engine mount. Looks pretty good. This is the transfer case mount, which to do these back two mounts, you need to take off your cross member. That's what this is. This is another video if you want to look at that. This transmission mount sits here, and the transfer case mount sits here. I think you just got to pry this out. This sits in there. So those two you get at by removing the cross member. Let's see what else we have here. This is your front engine mounts. There's one of these on each side. Let's go take a look at them. So as you can see, that one's pretty toasty. So we're going to be replacing that, one on each side. And I think that's pretty straightforward. You just need to loosen things up, and I believe you need to jack the engine up a little bit to support it while you switch out the new mount. So you say we crawl into the Jeep and get ourselves dirty and see if we can get these mounts replaced. So this is the transmission mount, or the rear engine mount, and there are a couple of 9/16 inch nuts on the top of it. If you remove them, the mount will come off. So there's one of the nuts. That should loosen up this side of the mount. Yep. Here is the other side of the vehicle. We're taking off the nut again. Okay, there's my mount. So this is a plate that the transmission mount is attached to. This comes off with 4 small bolts. And this one happens to be full of grease, so I took the whole plate off. I don't think you would have to do the mount, but this one is so full of grease that I'll clean it up a little bit. And here's the mount. So this one was getting pretty toasty too, like the front ones, where the rubber is starting to fall apart. So I think that's ready to go. So we'll clean this plate up, reinstall it, and then we'll put the mount onto this plate. This is the old transfer case mount. Looks like you're going to need to reuse the nut. Let's make sure that fits. Okay, that seems like it's going to fit. And there's a washer and another washer. So I think we're going to want to reuse those too. So this is going to go on the top here. And I believe this is going to go on the bottom. But we do that from underneath. This first part we can just change out this biscuit here. And I think this will just pop out of here. So we're cleaning up these mounts on the bottom of the transmission where this plate goes. I'm just using a little thinner. So this goes like this. There are 4 bolts that hold that up in there. They're 9/16 inch heads on them. They have a lock washer on them. So I'm going to replace that now. Now the actual mount goes in here, and yeah, like that or like that? Like that. This straight edge goes towards the front of the vehicle. This other edge has like a curve on it. And this gets a lock washer and a nut. And you need to reuse your old hardware because it doesn't come with new hardware. Okay, I'm using a 9/16 inch end wrench to tighten this bolt up from above. Like I say, we could have done this beforehand. Either way, it's not a big deal. Okay, that side's snug. So we want to make sure we replace this clutch release cable. It goes to the bell housing here. It's got a nut on the back side of it here. And it also attaches into the cross member right here in this little forked bracket. What we're going to do is we're going to hold up the cross member and we're going to attach it to this mount first, just so we can hold everything up. And you also got to engage your cable here into this fork bracket. So it's kind of a two-person job. I got my knee over here holding it up. So next operation, we have our bolts in, our cross member through the frame into the cross member. They get a washer, a lock washer, and a nut. And you're going to have to hold it from up above with a wrench. Alright, I'm going to go around to the other side. Same procedure. I'm going to get them started and then we'll come back and torque these down. Now we need to reinstall our transfer case mount. We've got the mount itself back in. We haven't tightened it up yet. We had a little bit of a trouble aligning it. So you may have to fool around with a little bit. Keep your bolts loose for your cross member. And this is a 15/16 socket and a 3/4 inch on the top to hold the nut. And now we're tightening up our bolts that go through the frame into the cross member. And we're holding the top of them. We're torquing them down pretty good. You want to double check that everything is tight. Like this is the center mount, the transmission mount. We loosened it back up when we were having our alignment troubles. Now we're going to tighten it. I think I already got this one. Yep, that's tight. So here's our new mount. That's the transmission mount. It all looks pretty good. We got our cross member back up. This one happened to have a muffler clamp hooked to the cross member, which isn't ideal. But now if you look over here, there's I think it's the brake return spring. Can you see it up in there? Mm-hmm. We've got to hook that back up to this hole here. There we go. Okay, that spring is back in. One more thing before the rear part of this is done and we move on to the front mounts is this stay cable that goes from the bell housing back to the cross member. I believe it might be called a clutch release cable, and you just want to snug this up enough. You need a 3/8 inch open end wrench to hold the cable itself and a 9/16 to turn the nut. So you just want this to be snug. You don't want it to be super tight. I never moved my back bolt on here, so I'm just snugging this up again. Just like that. So this is a 3/4 inch nut on the top here, the big one. The little ones that hold the mount down to the frame are, I think they're just 1/2 inch, aren't they?
Yeah.
So one tip I want to give you is to run your nut on here before you get your mount installed in the vehicle, because these threads are really tight. I wire brushed mine pretty good and ran them on there. I put this in the vise and ran the nut on there because you can't even get this to turn with all this stuff in the threads. It looks like paint. So get the paint off your threads, that'll help you out a little bit. So we're taking off this mount. As you can see, it's pretty well beat up. This also has the ground strap on it, which I would like to clean up a little bit. These are 1/2 inch nuts and bolts. We've had to hold the other ones from down below. This one looks like it wants to turn on its own. There we go. Okay, this is a 3/4 inch wrench for the bolt on the top. I should have taken that out before I did the other ones, but you can see how shot that rubber is. Save your nut. If you have a new lock washer, you can use that. Since lock washers have a tendency to flatten out after a while, then they don't lock anymore. Nut still looks pretty good, so save that.
Just about. I'm so close. Oh, I got it. Wait. I got it. I can't get it.
So we had to take the mount out of this side, clamp it down a little bit, then we're jacking up on the oil pan, and that allowed the engine to tip a little bit to the passenger side so we could get the driver's side mount out. That's a bugger, isn't it?
There. It should come out.
Okay, grab that other one. So we had to block down one side of the engine to get this mount to come out on the driver's side. And it's going to be a bear to get back in too. So we have our mount in. We still have it jacked up a little bit. We're having a little bit of trouble with the alignment of the holes on the plate, not the main hole, but we're having a little trouble with the alignment on these. So we had to jack it up to get things started. So before we install this motor mount, I want to hit this with the grinder and take the paint off of there, because this is where the ground strap's going to go. I did both sides, and I also want to hit down below here too, just to make sure everything's getting grounded. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to put the top bolt on, or the top nut, just so it doesn't fall off on us. So this is the passenger side. This has slotted holes on the bracket that holds the mount, and the other side just has holes. So okay, we have the engine mounts in. They're not tightened up yet. We're trying to line up the bolts on the driver's side. I'm able to move the engine a little bit with the bar on the skid plate. So while Julie puts the bolts in, I'm just torquing it over her way just a little bit. Not getting crazy with this bar. Julie's not only a hiker, she's a mechanic. Okay, we have the driver's side in, and we have the bottoms tightened down. We don't have the top. So now we're going to let this down and let the other side self-align into the slots. Okay, looks good. These are about right in the middle of the slots. It's self-aligned very nicely. All we need to do now is tighten things down, and I think we're good to go. We can remove our bar out of here. That came in handy for... That came in handy for lining up the other side. Okay, you want to make sure to replace your ground strap. Got our ground strap all shined up. Nice new washer on there. There you have it. All we have to do is tighten our top nuts down. That's a 3/4 inch. Well, we got all of our motor mounts in. We did the transmission mount and the transfer case mount and the 2 front mounts, which were completely shot. Yeah, you can take a look at those. This one was offset by about a 1/2 inch. And this one's about to fall apart on its own. You could probably pull this apart by hand. Look at that. So they were shot. To recap the whole thing, it's a little bit tricky in some points. The back 2 are pretty straightforward. If you drop your cross member, the transmission mount is very easy. The transfer case mount is a little trickier to get back together, but it wasn't too bad. To do the fronts is a little trickier than doing the backs. You need to take your bolts out of the mounts and take the top nut off, and then you need to jack the engine up. To do that, we put a piece of, I think it's like an 8x6 lumber underneath the oil pan. Put a jack on top of that, and then put a small piece of lumber on the oil pan itself, along the front edge of it, near the drain plug. Then we jacked the engine up, and we were able to get the passenger side mount out by doing that, but we couldn't get the driver's side out. So what we had to do is we had to jack it up and take the mount right out. Then we had the driver's side mount still in. We couldn't get that out. So we had to let this down all the way. Then we clamped this with a C-clamp and then jacked it up so it torqued the engine a little bit this way. Then we were able to get the driver's side out. And that worked pretty good. They went back in pretty well. So you can mount the driver's side first and then let the passenger side fall into the slots so it'll kind of self-center itself. I know a lot of guys are going to the polyurethane mounts, and these may not be the best mounts. We're going to see how long they last. I've heard that they are pretty poor quality. They were only like $20-some for all 4 of them. So I guess if we're doing this job again in a couple years, I'll be getting some urethane mounts. So that's how you replace the mounts on your Jeep. I appreciate you guys watching the video, and until next time, have fun working on your Jeep. Thanks for watching.